Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me is my esteemed colleague, as always, my partner, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I am doing very well, Dr. Dave. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I think I'm on my third or fourth cup of coffee, so this might sound a little bit like an auction this time. We don't know.
Okay, we will see.
Yeah. So we'd like to welcome all of our viewers and listeners back to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. Today's topic is going to be something that we believe is pretty relevant in the market right now. We've had a lot of questions from our clients and viewers and listeners about this topic frequently and over the last couple of months. So we decided we're going to address it. And that's this topic. This week's topic is interviewing strategies. So we're gonna take a little bit of a deep dive into interviewing strategies. We'll talk about both sides of the table, if you will, from an interviewer's perspective and from an interviewee's perspective. So and hopefully you'll walk away with some really good stuff to put in your pockets in your toolbox. So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on interviewing strategies?
Well, Dave, a lot of times when we hear the word interview or interviewing, especially for a new job, new position, we immediately probably start to have butterflies. And what that might entail. What type of questions are they going to ask me? Am I going to be prepared? What should I wear? All of those types of things. And now you also have to include those virtual interviews as well. What type of environment should I be in? So to answer some of those questions, I think it does require some type of interview strategies from, how should I prepare before the interview? What should what topic should I study as far as interviewing? What type of information should I be gathering? What should I do before the interview, the day before? What type of sleep regimen should I subscribe to? All those types of things should be considered when we think about those strategies for interviewing. What industry am I in? Do I have enough breadth of knowledge about that particular interview or about that particular job? What type of research should I do when I before going into the interview? Should I know about the company? I mean, so a lot of things go into interview preparation, and so those are some of the things that come to mind for me. So, what are some of the things that you could add to that list, Dave?
Yeah, so I think some of the things that we need to think about if we take an interviewer's perspective is, are we hiring the right person
Mm.
for the job, for the position, for the team? And sometimes, and I've seen this happen in the past, candidates are selected because of who they know, which is fine. You get a little bit of that, you know what you're getting into, you know what kind of car you're buying,
Right.
versus the best qualified candidate, because while you may know that person or know of that person or that person's been referred to you, you should really be looking for the person that's the most qualified for those positions because they're interviewing for a reason and there's no such thing as overqualified. That's a fallacy. You're either not qualified, you meet the requirement, or you exceed the requirements. So you're either
Mhm.
qualified or highly qualified.
Right.
And um, the advice I like to give to hire people that are doing the hiring is, if that person appears to be highly qualified and you're questioning their motives as to why they're uh, applying for that position, ask them. Don't
Right.
assume that they're going to be wanting to be too high of a price tag for the company. Maybe they're in just in a different spot in their career. Maybe they're wanting something with a little bit less responsibility. Maybe they've retired and this is a second career or third or fourth career for them. Maybe they've had some life changes. I mean, there's reasons behind why a highly qualified person would be applying for your position. So please do not discount them. Give them the opportunity and strongly consider them. And maybe they will be a little bit more expensive on the salary side, but it's definitely going to be worth it. So I would say ask those questions and find out why they're applying, and make sure you're hiring the right person for the job, the best qualified person, because I've seen too many times where a person that is barely meeting the minimum requirements for the job is hired, and it's such a struggle to get them ramped up just because they interviewed well. I mean, really dig into that resume, ask those questions, and find out, is this person really going to be the best for this position? Is it going to take them 6 months to a year to ramp up just to be able to do the minimum work, or can you bring someone in that's highly qualified that they'll be ramped up within a matter of just a handful of weeks? So that's one of the things I like to bring out for the interviewer side of things.
Well, Dave, that you bring up a very good point, and I've heard recruiters or interviewers ask those types of questions. Well, why are they choosing to apply for this position or interview for this position? And you're right, it's based on their assumption of why this person is doing versus asking that person why they're applying for that job. Like you say, they may be, highly qualified, but they're taking a step back. But to your point, they may have their own reasons for doing that. Like you said, they may
Mm-hmm.
be changing their career. Their commitment to the prior company may have been too much, and now they're trying to step back. They may have family members that they need to tend to. So that is a good suggestion for interviewers because I have heard that more than once. I've been in that situation as well. Submit a resume and it comes back and people look at me and say, well, that person has too much stuff going on. I don't think they can do this. Well, you haven't even interviewed that person. You've made an assumption, maybe based on your own skills or abilities, or
Mm-hmm.
previous, people that you've seen in those positions that may have struggled. So I think that's an important point to really consider is, why are they doing that? And the only way you're going to get that answer is if you ask that individual, not just make assumptions about it. So I think that's a very good point to bring up.
Yeah, and another piece of that puzzle is I just fell off that train. Give me a second, it'll come back. Um, is someone who appears to have done a lot. I mean,
Right.
just a huge breadth and depth and scope of knowledge. And that can sometimes be perceived as, well, that person couldn't have possibly have done that.
Right. Yeah.
How could that person do all these things? And to the interviewers, there are people that are like that. There are people that just absorb and they go in and they knock things out of the park. They don't need to do a job for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years to become an expert. There are high potential, high achieving individuals out there that is just part of their DNA, that they go above and beyond all the time. That's what drives them. And
Right.
that's how they get that breadth and depth and scope of knowledge that just seems unfathomable to some people. So don't think of it as that person couldn't have possibly done that. Ask them, tell me
Right.
more about yourself, and don't discount them because they've got 3 years here, 2 years here, 5 years here, because they're that good. They really are that good. Don't automatically think of that as a red flag, especially if it's quality type of work that is presented in their resume.
Right. Y- You
So,
know,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, and I know a lot of times interviewers are maybe, restricted to how they conduct some of those or how they ask some of those questions. So I get that as well, because again, I know some of the interview panels I've been on, been an interviewer, you were relegated to just the questions
Right.
on and you really couldn't go outside of that. So I can see the challenge.
Hmm.
But I think there's still ways you can get more information from people
Hmm.
because I think that's what's lacking. People don't, they have the standard questions, and if people don't throw it out there, it's really hard to maybe bring it out sometimes. So I get that, but it is well worth still trying to get that information from those people. If you have questions, figure out how to ask those questions because you may be passing up on someone who has a lot of skills, a lot of ability, a lot of
Hmm.
breadth of knowledge, like you said. And so it's well worth doing a little more investigative,
Yeah.
questioning just to
Yeah.
find out more about that individual. So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be done with a follow-up question. Tell me a
Right.
little bit more about this.
Right.
Are there any other examples that you can give? So, and just because the experience isn't recent doesn't mean it's not relevant, and doesn't mean that they
Right.
they are not capable of doing that. I mean, so just bear that in mind, interviewers. I think this is a good point to switch over to the interviewee side of
Right.
things,
Yep.
because this is probably what more people are interested in hearing. But that
Right.
was also to help the interviewees understand the potential different perspectives on the other side of the table. So
Right.
some of the things you'd mentioned were I absolutely agree with. How to dress,
Yep.
how to prepare, how to sleep.
Yep.
Another thing is doing dry runs during that time of
Right.
day to that potential location, or understanding the traffic patterns, because I've gone to interviews and on both sides of the table, and I'm like, oh, I've got plenty of time to get there, and I'm walking in at the last minute or 5 minutes late. I've seen that happen a lot. So just, I shouldn't say a lot, I've seen it happen. So
Right.
it's better to be 20 minutes early, sitting in your air conditioned car and walking in 5, 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early, than being walking through the doors at the exact time of your interview, or even potentially late. That
Right.
gives you that extra time to settle your mind, relax, breathe a little bit, be prepared, even if you're 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Just that gives you that little extra time to know that you're there. Now that part's done. You can check that
Right.
box off.
Yep.
Um, so, in addition to, well, not in addition to, you've mentioned getting to know the companies.
Right.
Find out what their performance is, find out what the expectations are, revisit that job uh, requisition, see what the job
Right.
description looks like. Research it online to see what other companies in the same or similar industries are doing, how they're posting their job descriptions. Is there any crossover? Um, how are you fitting into that job position? Are you just meeting the minimum requirements, or are you exceeding those requirements? How are you going to present that to the interviewer? Again, you're highly qualified, not overqualified. You either meet the requirements or you exceed the requirements. So,
Right.
really showcasing how you're exceeding in those areas. Um, so far as your resume, which crosses over into interviewing, make sure you're quantifying your answers when the questions are asked, and they're typically behavioral or situational. Tell me about a time when, or what would you do if. And then there's those out of the box questions, which I haven't seen a lot of that in the recent years. It used to be popular 10, 15 years ago, just those ridiculous questions like, you're in a room with no doors or windows. How do you get out?
Right.
Or and that's not to fluster you. That's to see how you're going to respond to those
Right.
quirky answers. Is there a rational or logical way to explain how you would get out of a room with no doors or windows? There's no additional information. So you can have a shovel, you can have a jackhammer, you can draw a window and open it. So just be creative with those type of answers, but be logical about it. So let's get into answering questions. I think this is really where most people struggle in interviews,
Right.
is the time constraint, the number of questions, and how do I answer those questions based upon my experience. So typically, most first interviews are going to be about 20 minutes for corporate jobs, which is kind of where we're focusing the conversation right now. Um, about 20 minutes, maybe 30, maybe 16. Have a watch, have your phone with you, turn it on, and put it on silent, but so you can see a clock in the room. Just have a watch or clock or something that you can manage your time with, because there's going to be about a minute.
You know what,
Go ahead.
Dave? I just
Yeah.
want to pause. I wouldn't necessarily put my phone out. I'd either say find a clock on a wall or a watch, because that can be distracting, even if it's on silent. If it lights up, the person may get distracted, look down. I'd suggest not putting it on the table or
I've seen it.
bringing
I've
it
seen it
out.
happen where there's rooms that don't have clocks deliberately.
Right, I get
So
that, but maybe a
as
watch,
an option. Yeah, as an
because
option. Yeah.
I don't know that. Like I say, I just would caution people, because people are so tied, and it's just
Yeah,
a reflex to look at their phone
yeah.
and again, it could distract them on when they're responding to a
Fair
question. So
point.
I would just
Fair point.
caution people, because again, a lot of us are tied to our phones,
Yeah,
and that's our lifeline. So if it flashes, we immediately get
right.
distracted. So that's the
Fair
only
point.
caution that I would have for
Yeah,
that.
and absolutely, and again, understanding your environment, where you're at, what type of industry are you in. So those are very good. That's a very good point that you made. Very valid point.
Yeah.
Um, so time management is an important thing. Remember, there's going to be 1 to 2 minutes of introductions where they're introducing the individuals or individual on the that's conducting the interview or conducting the other interviewers, and then there's going to be a 1 to 2 minute wrap up. Do you have any questions for us? Hopefully, they give you more than just a minute to ask questions, but then that's that meet and greet and thank you very much. The end, the bookend. So the time that's in between there is really what the time you're working with. So if you have a 20-minute interview, you're probably looking at 16 to 18 minutes of actual time spent answering those questions. And if there's 12 questions, you've got 18 minutes, that's not a lot of time. You have to be really, really conscious of how you're articulating those answers. Don't get hung up on too much time on one question, over explaining or over answering. So time management's a big one.
Well, in reference to time management, and you touched on it, just that the whole introduction piece. Typically, they're going to ask you about yourself, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about yourself, and in reference to what Dave is saying about managing your time, you really want to figure out what your elevator speech is or what your introduction speech is, because think about this. This is all about you. This is something that you should know, in great detail, but the trick is not to go into as much detail, because remember, you're on a time crunch like Dave
Mm-hmm.
said. So maybe it's a 1.5 minute, maybe a 2 minute introduction of yourself. So I would practice that to get it down to that limit. Again, not to explain your whole life story, but rather to bring up those pertinent parts of your life or things that you want them to know. But be really concise about it. Again, practice it, and I think that's the one challenge a lot of us have. We want people to know so much about us, but we are limited on time. So really think about those things or key things that may be pertinent for that job, for that industry or whatever it is, so that you can come off as being in control, and not just rambling. So I think that's a lot of people fail to do that. Really think about what their introduction is going to be before they even start that interview, because you're going to be limited on your time. So just think about that.
Yeah, think about it as like a summary of yourself, and that's your opportunity to bring in those highlights that really differentiate you in a positive way, where you've gone above and beyond, those things that may not come up in the questions that you can really
Right.
showcase yourself. And to Joe's point, 1 to 2 minutes, that's your sweet spot. So
Yep.
again, that's chipping away that 20 minutes or that 40 minutes for those questions. Um, Remember, it's two-sided. They're looking for a good fit, but you're also looking for a good fit. Is this, I mean, the money could be great, but if you're not getting that warm and fuzzy, maybe it's not the right fit for you. Maybe there's,
Right.
pay attention to your spidey senses and when
Yep.
the hair goes up on the back of your neck, or that weird feeling in your gut that's not the good kind, not the good butterflies. It's the, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to throw up. So
Mhm.
pay attention to the signals that are being presented to you during the interview. And remember, this is also your opportunity to interview them as well. When they say, "What questions do you have?" or "Do you have any questions?" the answer should always be yes, and you should already have those questions pre-formatted in your mind. What are you looking for that's pertinent to you? Is it flexibility in the schedule? Is it the number of work hours? Is it is there travel involved? Um, what are the expectations? What can you do to, how whatever's going to be important to you. And then the other thing you can ask, there's some good questions, is what can I do to make your job easier? Ask that to the hiring manager. What can I do to help make your job easier? What can I do to help make you more successful? are there any special projects that you would like to see, have accomplished in the next 12 months? That's going to, those are good questions to get a good temperature check on what their needs are. Maybe they have people that are already doing those jobs, but they're not right for those projects. Maybe it's if they say just show up on time. What's that telling you? That means that there may be an underlying attendance issue. Maybe people are used to coming in late and they just need someone to be there when the store opens, not 20 minutes later. You know,
Right.
so think about those things, those types of questions. Um, let's get into answering questions a little bit more deeper. Go
Well,
ahead.
Dave, I wanted to go back to what you mentioned previous, and that's the whole spidey sense, the feeling, because I think that is a challenge for a lot of us when we've maybe been out there on the job market, interviewing over and over again, but willing to accept things that may not feel good or sound good, but you're thinking, oh, I can deal with this, I can handle this, I'll adapt. And 6 months in, a year later, you're thinking, oh, why did I accept this job? So I think
Mhm.
that's very important as well, to really listen to your gut, or if you're not feeling right about it, then really maybe take some time to think about it, to make sure that if you make that decision to accept it, if you're offered the position, to really think about the impact this might have on you. And so
Mhm.
I think that's very important as well, for people to really take that to heart. This could be my job for, a year, 5 years, 10 years. So really think about it. Even though you may, again, you're at a point where you're like, I just need a job, really consider the consequences of accepting that position. If you
Mhm.
have that, sense of this doesn't feel right, so just think about that. I just wanted to highlight that again, because that is
Yeah,
important as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Another piece for that reminded me of, for those people who are interviewing who are nervous. I mean, just
Yeah.
almost beside themselves, where they'd rather. There was a comedian that once said that there was a statistic out there that people that are so afraid of public speaking, they'd rather die than go up in front of a crowd and speak. It's like,
Right.
I don't know. I'd personally like to breathe a little bit longer. But remember this: you're asking and answering questions every day, all the time, of your family, of your friends, of your peers, your coworkers. You're already doing these things. You've already answered these questions 1,000 times, just maybe not a one-on-one or a one with a 4 or 5 person panel.
Right.
You've already done this. So don't think of it as an interview. Oh my gosh, this is a make or break, live or die thing. It's a conversation. You've had this conversation 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, maybe just not in this format.
Right.
So how to answer questions. Now you can Google this, you can research it online. There are a bunch of different ways to do this. There's a STAR method: situation, task, um, action, and result
Yep.
format, and that's a good exercise to get you comfortable. It can be a little tedious at first because it forces you to really think about how you're answering that question. Another way, and this is tends to be a little bit easier for people to digest, is come up with 3, 4, 5 stories that you love to tell other people. When you get the opportunity, you're bragging, you're boasting about your job, your career, what you've done, that one-upmanship, that competitive side of you that really says, I'm really good at this. No, I'm really good at this. No, I'm really good at this. Think of those 3 to 5 stories and think of different ways you can tell them, from maybe a difficult situation, how you were successful, managing stress, improving employee performance, improving your performance, and narrow those stories down. Do them in 3 to 4 sentences, and then to really capture the important piece of it. And then think about the different ways you can answer it. Like I said, the different perspectives, because
Yeah.
5 stories times 3 different perspectives, that's 15 different answers. And it's 5 stories that you already know, and it's
Right.
perspectives
Yeah.
that you already understand. That's going to help you manage your time, and make sure you quantify how many employees, how many dollars did you save, what was the improvement or the decrease in inefficiency. I mean, what quantify in your answers, um, what you can do to benefit the company. because it's one thing to say, I'm the top salesperson for automobiles in my company. What does that mean? Well, I sold 2 cars this year. Well, that's not a lot unless they're 9-figure cars. You know,
Right.
that's a whole different audience. If
Yep.
you say I'm in the top, I sold. The other side of that is I sold 5,000 cars this year, but they're $50 cars.
Right.
So when you're boasting and when you're quantifying, make sure that they understand I'm the top salesperson. I sold 2 cars at $20.6 million each for the company.
Right.
Maybe that company only sells 1 car per year per person. You've just doubled that. That's an important number to quantify. Conversely, if you sold those $5,000, 5,000 cars for $50, what's the norm? Is it 20,000 cars? So put things into perspective to help them understand where you're coming from, because neither one of those is bad, because one's talking about volume and one's talking about the overall income for the company. So really think about those things, how to answer those questions through storytelling. Get your story down and those perspectives. That's going to save you so much time, and that's going to help you because, like I said, you already know your best stories.
Right.
You know what you love to brag about. That story doesn't change. You've told it 1,000 times.
Yep.
Then you don't have to worry about answering the question. Well, what if they ask me this? What if they ask? Let them ask whatever they want. You have the same 3 to 5 stories and the same 3 to 5 perspectives that you can tell each one of those stories from.
Dave, to your point, I've been in that situation where I have used the same story for multiple questions because, like you say, they may ask you, "Well, how did you respond to this? What was the outcome?" So learning those stories inside and out, it definitely saves time and it definitely gets you in the mode of, oh, I got this. I know this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm comfortable with. So I
Mm-hmm.
agree. Putting together, and that's what I've done in the past. Is I have, my use the star method, and I'll come up with 3 or 4 different examples of those each, different things, different projects I worked on or whatever it is. But I've done that. Have 3 or 4 in my back pocket so I can always refer to those, and it just helps, like you said, when you write it down, when you see it, and then go over it a few times in preparation for that. And so that has worked for me, being able
Mm-hmm.
to share, because again, they're your stories. Like Dave said, you told them 100 times to friends, coworkers, family, but now you're going to be, asked to quantify what does that really mean. So just think in those terms of, okay, I've got my stories, my go-to stories. Now I just need to make sure I have them, down pat. I need to be able to recite them. So that's what it really comes down to, because they're your stories
Yeah,
again. So you should know more better than anybody. So I think
absolutely.
that's a very good suggestion.
And then the way you end each one of those stories, each one of those questions is what I learned was. That's going to show the potential employer or the hiring manager that you're capable of making changes and adapting, and you're diligent about not making the same mistake over and over and over.
Right.
You know, you're
Yep.
you learn as you go. Probably one of the most difficult questions or most challenging questions is what is your biggest weakness, or tell me about a time something negative happened where you had an argument with your boss or your supervisor or you were disciplined. Same thing. Be candid, but don't overtell that story. Don't make it sound
Right.
like you're the worst employee in the world. We all make mistakes. And then again, end it with what I learned was.
Right.
And tell me about a time when you didn't get along with your supervisor. That's a fairly common question, or with a colleague. Talk about it. Or what's your weak what's an area your biggest weakness? Maybe it's time management because I get so focused that I work through my lunch and I know I'm required to take it,
Right.
or I get so focused. Sometimes I might be a couple minutes late for a meeting, or turn it into a positive, turn that negative into a positive. And what I'm doing to combat that is I have a timer set that I know that every 45 minutes I'm going to get up and walk for 5 minutes or something like that. Setting an alarm on your phone so you know that you can be at that meeting 5 or 10 minutes early, to give yourself enough time to get across campus or to the other buildings. So Whatever that weakness is, make sure you turn it into a positive and tell them what you're doing. What I learned was I need to focus more time, on managing my time and allotting the proper time for each project as needed. And here's what I'm doing about it. What you
Right.
learned and what you're doing about it.
Well,
So
I think before I know it's probably getting close to time, but I just wanted to highlight too. I know you talked about the weaknesses, but I think you should also really consider about your strengths too.
yeah.
Just in that same, that same mentality or that same approach. Okay, so I know I'm good at this, and this is how it translates to business impact or positive business impact. I think that's also important. I'm meticulous at scheduling
Mhm.
and how that that leads to me being on time before due dates and things like that. So just that same approach, with sharing that I know I need to work on this and these are things I know I can do. Same with your strengths. How does that translate to business success? I think that's also important as well.
Yeah.
So
And I think the final thing I'm going to leave us with, because we're down to about 2 minutes, is
right.
transferable skills.
Yeah.
Time management is transferable. Technical skills are transferable. If you can turn a wrench on a car, you can turn a wrench on a boat. You just have to familiarize yourself with that particular piece of equipment.
Right.
Um, um, Public speaking, that transfers. Communication, that transfers. Knowledge management, all your skills are transferable.
Right.
Even if it's, well, I'm a safety specialist and I'm going to work in an office place environment for the first time. What do you bring with that transferable skill? Awareness, situational awareness, where the exits are, how you can help. Maybe you can be one of the people that are in charge of like evacuating the building as an additional duty, you know. So just really become comfortable with your transferable skills, knowing that it's not, your experience crosses industries. You don't have to be locked
Right.
into one industry. Sales is sales. It's just what do you want to sell and how do you want to sell it. So that's what I'm going to leave that with. So we've got about a minute and a half left. What are your final thoughts for the audience, Joe?
Well, Dave, I know we touched on a lot of things. I mean, we briefly touched on like sleeping and getting good night's sleep. We didn't really even mention that, but I mean, there's so many things
Mhm.
that you can do to prepare, or so many strategies that you really should consider when you're thinking about that interview process. And Dave said it. There's a lot of stuff online about how you can prep. I mean, we don't suggest that you go get oversaturated and just look at everything out there about interviewing because that could definitely confuse you and discourage you. So just really think about. I think we hit some key things: the interview questions, the time limits that you have. Just remembering those stories. That they're your stories. Your introduction. Those are your stories. Make sure you got them down pat, because if you can't tell your own story, then that leaves a lot to be desired when they're looking at you and saying, "Well, this person can't even share this experience." So really practice those things, write them down, go over them, and just be prepared to, like Dave said, this is it almost seems like an interrogation sometimes, but we have conversations all the time. So just really get comfortable with that. Even if you have to have friends and family come together for a mock interview, that is helpful as well. So just a lot of things out there to help you better prepare for that interview. So don't just go into it thinking, "Oh, I've got this." Even if you may know everything they're going to ask you, it still takes some type of preparation to do an effective interview. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap up the podcast, Joe. You touched on many things and you gave a great summary. So I'm not going to go any further with that. So at this time, we'd like to thank. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It's one of our favorite topics we talk about offline a lot, and I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode. If this is your first time, hope you enjoyed it. If it's your bazillionth time, then thanks for coming back. And until next time, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.